Welcome to Punctuation for Court Reporters, video number 65. I'm Ken Wick. Let's get started. So this video covers when do you put a comma before a phrase starting with including, such as, or like. So here are some examples. I will answer these answer these when I cover the examples, but this is also, you can test your knowledge with these. Is my friend Sammy loves to travel to distant countries such as Spain, China, and Brazil. Well, this video is really about when do you put a comma here, but just for fun, do you put a comma? Do you put commas around Sammy? We'll cover that, or I'll cover that when I do the answer. The next example and test is the elite college requires an application, including your publication history. Would you put a comma here? And the third one is a very similar sentence. The elite college requires an application, including your past education. Would you put a comma here? So I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the videos. And if you like the video, please hit like. And please see the description for links to videos and books. So what do the references say? So LMEG says if it, meaning including, such as, and like, introduces a necessary explanation or example, no comma. So if it's necessary, no comma. If it introduces an unnecessary explanation, then use a comma. So necessary, no comma, unnecessary, comma. The BGGP, I didn't find any information. Not that it doesn't have any information, but I didn't find any. The Greg's Reference Manual only covers this situation of using such as and like between the subject and the verb. All my examples, it occurs at the end of the sentence, but it would work just as well as between the subject and verb. It can occur anywhere in the sentence. What the Greg's Reference Manual says is, if it's essential, meaning the phrase that such as and including introduces, if that phrase is essential or fits smoothly into the flow of the sentence, no commas. But if not, so if it's non-essential or doesn't fit smoothly, then use a comma. As you can tell, these are actually the same thing. If it's necessary, if it's essential, these are basically the same thing. And the Chicago Manual Style says if these words, including, such as, introduces a restrictive phrase, no comma. And if it introduces a non-restrictive phrase, use a comma. So basically, the references are all saying the same thing, and I'm going to cover that in the next slide. So what is the summary? They're all saying the same thing. The answer is use a comma when including, such as, or like introduces a non-restrictive phrase. So what is a non-restrictive phrase? Well, that's a phrase which is not essential for the meaning of the sentence. Okay? And do not use a comma when including, such as, or like introduces a restrictive phrase, meaning that a restrictive phrase is something that is essential for the meaning of the sentence. And if you want to see more on essential and non-essential, go to video 4. I cover this a little bit more in depth. And on page 9 of my book, and also in this video number 4, I say sometimes the distinction between an essential and non-essential element, that could be a phrase or a clause, is difficult to determine or is insignificant. So I do realize my examples are just isolated sentences, and maybe the context will give it a different answer, and I'll try to cover that when I do the examples, which we're going to do now. So that is the answer. Now let's go apply this to several examples. So first, let's cover the examples from the first slide. My friend Sammy loves to travel to distant countries such as Spain, China, and Brazil. So do we put a comma here? Well, the question is it essential? If and and I and basically, do we need to know that Spain, China, and Brazil are distant countries, or somehow defines distant countries? And the answer is really no. So we would put a comma here, and then basically for the same reason. This is why I put it here. Sammy, you put commas around non-essential things. So my friend Sammy, when we put commas here, we don't put commas because I assume this person has more than one friend. So if we just said my friend loves to travel to distant countries, we don't know which friend. So since Sammy is essential to the meaning, then we don't put commas. If we said my only friend, if the person only had one friend, my only friend Sammy, then that would actually have commas around Sammy because the person only has one friend. Therefore, we don't need something to help us understand who the only friend is. So in this case, the answer is my friend Sammy. Whoops, there's no commas here. Well, I accidentally put them in. Should be my friend, no commas here. This is a mistake. My friend Sammy loves to travel to distant countries, commas such as Spain, China, and Brazil, because Spain, China, and Brazil don't really help define distant countries. I think what happened is I got comma happy when I was replacing these, when I was making up the answers. So no commas here. The next example is the elite college requires an application, including your publication history. Would you put a comma here? So is this publication history helping to define the sentence, especially, this word application? I would say, in all my experience in application going to colleges, you really don't have to put your publication history. That'd be sort of unusual. So I'm going to say because it includes publication history, this makes this essential to the meaning. So I would say no comma. But contrary-wise, the elite college requires an application including your past education. I'm pretty sure if you applied to college, your past education would be pretty much something that's standard on all applications. So effectively, past education isn't really essential to the meaning of application or to the rest of the sentence. So I say you put a comma here. Now you could come up if your interpretation is, this is where it comes up to the interpretation, is that all of these you could come back and say, well, I think differently that this is essential to the meaning or not essential to the meaning. Then you would put a comma based upon your opinion on the matter. So like I said in my previous slide, sometimes the difference between essential and non-essential is difficult to determine or is insignificant. And like I said, we're only using isolated sentences. Who knows, maybe something in the context with publication history. Maybe there is a previous sentence that talked about publication history, so we would know that this would make this not essential, and we put a comma. But on the standalone sentence, I say, just my experience is you don't need to, put your publication history within an application, therefore it's essential. And this one, your past education, is pretty much standard on every application, therefore it's not essential. And just going back to this one, I don't think we need to know that Spain, China, and Brazil are distant countries relative to the United States. So let's get on to some other examples. Send me a message, including your plans for this weekend. I'd say if you just said send me a message, that's pretty generic. Can't really tell what it's about. So I think this is making this essential. This portion is essential to the meaning of the sentence, or at least the message. Therefore, I would say no comma. But maybe there was a previous, somewhere in the previous discussion or something in the context before then, there was a question about speaking about this weekend. Then that would actually make this portion, including your plans for this weekend, non-essential because it was already in the context, but we can't tell that from an isolated sentence. But in that case, then you put a comma. So once again, you can see how I'm just trying to show you how things can be essential or non-essential really based upon the context. But on this isolated sentence, I would say this including or your plans for this weekend help to define the message, therefore it's essential. And no comma. The next example is I prepare many technical documents, such as engineering plans. Are engineering plans necessary for the understanding of technical documents? I hope not, or this is just an example of a technical document. Therefore, I say it's non-essential and can use a comma. And just repeating myself, obviously if the context was you knew this person was an engineer and produced engineering plans, and it'd be obviously not essential. But I think just on the surface level, technical engineering plans does not help to define technical documents. And then the last one I want to cover is an example out of the LMEG, which is my brother endured horrible things like starvation and torture. Does starvation and torture help to define what this is? I say yes, because you're not too sure what horrible things is sort of generic. I don't know. Horrible things is, I mean, he was forced to eat things he didn't like. I don't know. Who knows what this means? Sort of very broad. So I actually think that this the starvation and torture helps define what horrible things are, helps define what the sentence is. But LMEG actually puts a comma here, and possibly due to maybe there's something in the context, like if this was part of a trial, and we all know that what this person had to endure, or maybe it was already previously stated, and the person said horrible things like starvation and torture, then we would know that what the person was referring to, and it doesn't help to define this anymore because we know from the context, then we would put a comma here. So as you can see, sometimes this comma is really based upon the context. But for me, I probably would have not put a comma, but LMEG put a comma because I guess it's saying this is not helping to define what horrible things are. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. This is really an exercise in determining or using including, such as, and like is really an exercise in determining if what follows is essential to the meaning or not essential to the meaning. If it's essential to the meaning, no comma. But if it's not essential to the meaning, then you put a comma. So thank you for watching.